All right, it looks like the recording has started. Good morning, Mr. Spencer, Superintendent Spencer. Glad you could be here. Now, one thing I want to remind everybody of is to please make sure that your camera is turned on and that you're unmuted the entire time. We have to make sure that everybody can be seen and heard at all times. So as we get started, I'm going to go down the roll call, and we'll have, if you'd like to, if you just want to give just a quick introduction of who you are and what you do, then we'll get to know everybody on the committee. We have several people here who are presenting today, and so we'll introduce them as they come up in the agenda, and then you may see another person or two who is from our division, and they're providing support during the meeting. So let's go down the roll call list. If you would just unmute yourself. Your cameras on, and then let me know present. Kelly Abney.
Yes, Kelly Abney.
Kelly, I think you might be on mute, but okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, you're fine.
All right. I'm Kelly Abney, principal at Menifee Central. We're in K8 and we're in Eastern Kentucky.
Thank you. Brian Boland. Mary Beth Bowling. Brian Coleman.
I'm Brian Coleman. I'm with Somerset High School. I'm an engineering instructor here.
Thank you. Dustin Combs. Ashley Cox.
Hello, I am representing as a parent from Anderson County Schools.
Thank you. Christina Dalton. Maria Diaz Ramos. Laura Grant. Diane Hatfield.
Good morning. I'm Diane Hatfield. I'm serving as a board member for Southgate Independent Schools. I am a retired educator of 40 years. Most recent job was with the Northern Kentucky Cooperative.
Thank you. Michael Hay.
Good morning, Michael Hay here. I'm one of the regional directors for the Migrant Education program. We're housed here in the Southern region in the College of Education at Eastern Kentucky University. Good morning.
Thank you. David Malonti.
Hello, I am one of the assistant directors in the Division of School and Program Improvement, and I'm also the ombudsman for non-public school services under the Every Student Succeeds Act.
Thank you. Carrie Riggs.
Good morning, I'm Carrie Riggs. I'm a math interventionist at Sparrow Early Childhood Center in Anderson County.
Thank you. Steve Copier.
Good morning. My day job is with the Diocese of Covington in Northern Kentucky. I also represent the Kentucky Non-Public Schools Commission. I will try to represent as best I can the certified non-public schools that we deal with.
Thank you. Tim Spencer.
Tim Spencer, Superintendent, Menifee County Schools.
Thank you. And Robert Tanner.
My name is Cheryl Tanner, and I'm the Migrant Advocate Recruiter for Webster County Schools.
Thank you. And Christina Dalton.
My name is Christina Dalton, and I'm the District Social Worker in Davis County Public Schools.
Thank you. All right. Did I miss anybody who is a member and I may have joined and I didn't notice? All right, thank you all so much. I'm so glad to see you. For returning members, thank you so much for continuing to serve. And for our new members, I'm so excited to meet you and to get to work with you. So our first, just another reminder, please make sure that your cameras are turned on and your microphones are unmuted so you can be seen and heard at all times. Our first presentation this morning is on the local laboratories of learning. You may have heard about those. We have David Cook, I'm not sure if David is on, but I know Sarah Snipes is here. David, are you here?
Tara, I don't think David was going to be able to join us this morning.
Okay, well, Sarah, if you're ready, do you want to go ahead and take it away?
Sure, and I will share my screen here if you'll give me just a moment.
Sarah, do you want to introduce yourself just real quick? I didn't have a chance to give an introduction of you. If you want to tell everybody about yourself a little bit too.
Sure. Sarah Snipes, former educator out of Frankfort Independent Schools, and transitioned into my role here at the Department of Education in our Division of Innovative Learning as the program manager. So part of that role is to manage our Innovative Learning Network, which has about 37 districts across the Commonwealth. And kind of those districts who opt into the sandbox, who want to try new and innovative approaches to the student experience and learning opportunities here in our state. So with that work, I also help coordinate the local laboratories of learning, or L3s as we call them, which I'll share a little bit more with you today. Let's see, there we go. And again, I apologize. David Cook is our director of the Division of Innovative Learning. He is unable to be with us this morning, but thank you so much for having us on, Tara. So just to guide our conversation today, I wanted to walk through, for those of you who may be less aware of what the L3s are, just to kind of review and go over what our L3s are doing and how their work is related to KDE's United We Learn initiative. Also wanted to bring forth some trends that are existing in the assessment and accountability prototypes that our local coalitions and their communities are developing. And then finally, we'll touch on what our communities are learning from inclusive design. So just to give everyone a little bit of background, United We Learn was an initiative that kicked off last year for KDE. However, there were quite a few events that led up to where we are today with United We Learn. In 2019, the Board of Education passed an equity resolution that really spearheaded some of the work that followed with Commissioner Glass's listening tour that happened across the Commonwealth virtually in the spring of 2021. So over 11 virtual sessions, Dr. Glass held virtual opportunities for any community member across Kentucky to join in and share their stories. Our teams listened for their experiences in our current education system and their hopes and aspirations for our future. From that, we formed a very inclusive statewide coalition of about 60 members who we refer to as the Kentucky Coalition for Advancing Education. That coalition had a pretty big lift. They took all the data from those listening tours and they started to identify trends. They went out into their own communities, and conducted some additional empathy interviews. And they brought all of that learning back, all of those stories back to the table. And they created what we call the United We Learn report. That is available through our KDE website. And I can also make sure that Tara is able to provide a link to that for you if you'd like to go over that information. In that report, our coalition came up with 10 Commonwealth themes around the current state of education, what users of our system currently experience. But aligned to that is that future vision. So in the Kentucky Education Summit, our first annual summit that happened back in November of 2021, we kind of showcased this work to the public. This was a really exciting summit. We continue to hear great feedback from that event, and just a really great way that the community rallied around this work and the hope for the future of education here in our state. This was also the event where we kicked off our local laboratories of learning and kind of publicly announced them for the first time. So the L3s, if you think about them, they're kind of the vehicle that gets us from that current state, what users are currently experiencing in our education system, and that future vision. So they're kind of the vehicle on the ground that's driving the design work for what that might look like. At the heart of their work, they're hoping to forge deeper connections with their own local communities. They're forming local inclusive teams, just like our statewide coalition. And they're really working and designing around these habits of practice, being including empathy, co-creation, inclusion, and reciprocity. And of course, we hope that in doing this with our local communities, we're shaping Kentucky's next assessment and accountability system. So these teams, everyone from a local farmer to a business owner to a district superintendent and students, are all sitting at a table together, co-creating new approaches, new student experiences, assessment, and accountability models using a design thinking process. And of course, we have our statewide coalition, as well as the board and KDE, who are listening in as these groups influence policy at our state and federal level. So currently we have 2 cohorts. I will actually be notifying districts selected for our 3rd cohort this morning and hope to have those publicly announced later this week. We have cohort 1, which launched in the fall: Allen, Fleming, Frankfort Independent, Jefferson, Johnson, Logan, and Shelby. Those communities have been hard at work since the fall, and they are currently testing their prototypes out in their communities. And cohort 2, which includes Berea Independent, Boone, Bullitt, Corbin Independent, Greenup, and Lawrence, are just launching their local teams and going out into their communities to conduct their first empathy interviews. They will be finishing an initial design cycle around the end of this year. So what these teams have done so far, and a big piece of launching this work in a way that drives some sustainable transformative change, is that just like the KCAE, our L3 districts were supported in recruiting a team of diverse stakeholders. We did this in 3 ways. If you think of these as 3 buckets. They had some direct recruitment. Each district was encouraged to think about approximately 10 members of their local community that were someone they wanted to directly involve and go out and recruit to be a part of their team. This could include their local mayor, and any elected officials, representatives. It could include specific families or community members. We also encourage teams to put out an open application across their entire community. I have to share the excitement that that has come out of Coalition 2. So, I'm sorry, Cohort 2 so far. One of our small rural communities had a little bit of concern. They were a little bit nervous to throw that open application out there, thinking, how many people want to jump into assessment and accountability conversations in our community? And what started as perhaps maybe a low expectation turned out to be about 50 folks from across their community who were interested in engaging in this conversation. And then we also had a process for community sampling, so encouraging districts to look into their Infinite Campus data and really leaning into a particular population or a group of students or families that typically are underrepresented or underserved, to help ensure that they have seats at the table through this process. So what we end up with is currently 7 cohort 1 teams that each have coalitions of about 30 individuals from across their community. Again, just to give you an overview of their process, this is a glimpse of cohort 1. They started with empathizing in their communities. They formed those inclusive teams. They went out and conducted additional empathy interviews. They listened to the stories of their neighbors. They came back, took that information, and defined a problem statement. What is an educational problem that our community is experiencing? They took that information in that problem statement and began to brainstorm possible solutions and selected something they'd like to prototype. And from there, they worked through storyboarding, creative matrix to develop a prototype idea. And so currently cohort 1 is taking their idea, they're pitching it out to users in their community, and they're getting testing, feedback testing through surveys, through interviews. So no one is implementing their prototype at this stage, but they're taking what they're hearing from their stakeholders and refining their prototypes before they start to implement at pilot sites. So the good stuff, of course, is what are these prototypes? Currently, our communities are hard at work. Our first cohort, as I mentioned, are the only ones currently with their prototypes developed. But you'll see here that Allen County is working on a student defensive learning system that aligns with a graduate profile that is currently in development as well. Logan County is working on a dashboard that will display profile competencies and academic success, but also those things that go beyond some of our classroom, traditional classroom achievement. So we have participation in internships and extracurricular activities. So a conversation there in Logan County is around this idea of student micro-credentials. In Shelby County, they're focused not so much on developing a profile of a graduate, but how can they engage every stakeholder and create a community-wide communication plan so that everyone understands the competencies in their profile. Johnson is working around career pathways and students being able to attain certification through a digital portfolio. In Frankfort Independent, they're working on developing project-based capstones at the 5th grade pilot level, and they're hoping to develop that into a competency-based report card as well. Jefferson is refining their backpack of success skills and looking for ways that students can show mastery of skills outside of a classroom setting. I forgot to update this, but it should be updated to also include that they're considering something like a mastery transcript and shifting to a way that we showcase and show mastery and count what students do perhaps outside of the classroom, the learning that happens outside of the classroom as well. And in Fleming County, they're refining their bridge performance indicators and measures of quality dashboards, similar to Shelby, in thinking through their communication plan and how they engage all members of their community. So back in January, that Kentucky Coalition for Advancing Education that I mentioned earlier came together. They'll come together again on Tuesday. And their role at this point is really to listen to our L3s and take their learning and talk through the trends and the implications for a statewide system. So what we noticed back in January when this group met, they found a few trends already in the work that our Cohort 1 was doing. Commonwealth theme number 9, that's in the report I mentioned, is something that a lot of our Cohort 1 members are rallying around. A lot of their communities lifted up this need to make assessments go beyond a snapshot of a whole child to reflect what communities need to cultivate learning. Many of our L3s from Cohort 1 are not necessarily doing scratch builds of something new in their districts. They're simply refining and redesigning some of the tremendous innovations that they already have, but this time being very intentional in welcoming those folks to the table and having them be part of the design in itself. A lot of these prototypes are currently focused on changing the student learning experience. Teams are focused on building trust across their community. Profile of a graduate is common with our first group, but we are seeing that differences between their communities are still honored. And then, of course, many of our teams are reporting that the current size and weight of our state assessment system is still competing for time and attention with these prototypes. So when we bring our L3s together, something that we always like to do is have them reflect on not only their designs and their prototypes, but what they're learning about doing business differently, being inclusive, using empathy and co-creation and reciprocity to strengthen habits of practice in their decision-making spaces within their district. And so I just wanted to include some takeaways from some of our team leads across our L3 communities when we asked them what they're learning about bringing an inclusive team together to do design thinking. Shelby County highlights that it's all about building relational trust in their community. These reciprocal partnerships between their families, community members, and schools. Johnson has relied on many different groups through this process, and their feedback from these stakeholders has been that they just appreciated being included in something that's so important. In Allen County, they're hearing diverse perspectives and voices that they rarely hear from and might not have otherwise had the opportunity to. And so they appreciate seeing things on a larger scale. And then in Frankfurt Independent, in some of their reflections, they acknowledge that their stakeholders are the ones that know what this looks like for their community and their students. So L3s are shaping the future of education in Kentucky. While these are pockets of communities around the Commonwealth, it's very exciting to think about these powerful leaders coming together in a community of practice every month. They're sharing their learning, networking between themselves, but also sharing with that Kentucky Coalition to present their updates and their learning at the state level as well. And as I mentioned, KCAE is identifying those trends and they're serving as champions of this work, and they're sharing those policy implications with the board, with KDE, as well as state and federal government. So currently we are reviewing applicants for Cohort 3 on Tuesday of this week. That application window closed for districts to participate. So we are very eager and excited digging into the applications that we received. And as I mentioned, we should be announcing those members soon. So that work will lead us, Cohort 3 will lead us into the fall and winter of 2022 and into the spring of 23, as our districts will eventually shift to all being in the implementation phase of their prototypes and sharing that learning of that implementation back with us as well. Tara, I know that was a lot, but I hope I shared some things with folks that got them excited as well. I know we've been excited here at KDE, just being in these communities, seeing this work happen. It's been powerful at the end of the day just to talk about inclusion and see such diverse groups at the table, passionate about the work of transforming our systems.
Thank you, Sarah. It looks like we have a question. Ms. Hatfield has her hand raised.
This is very exciting work to hear about and powerful work around the state. Out of curiosity, is Title I dollars from the state level used to support this work?
So currently we have some funding that we've applied for through the ESSER funding that was made available for COVID. And so we've been utilizing that funding. However, we do encourage districts to think about in terms of family engagement and especially I think to the point of implementation. I think that funding could definitely support this work in our districts through Title I.
Thank you.
All right, and Ms. Dalton has her hand raised as well.
I just have a question on, I'm curious when you say the empathy interviews, what does that look like? Like what?
So we have what we provide to our teams was a one-page document that really outlined some questions that shaped around not so much what do you want how would you suggest fixing this or what would make this better. Instead, we asked folks questions that prompt storytelling about their educational experience. It could be about their own child, it could be their own experience, but we truly just want to ask questions that prompt the storytelling of their educational experience. And so what we equip our teams with is a document that outlines, keeping everything anonymous, of course, but some note-taking space as well. And we in our work specifically, we've targeted some questions around those Commonwealth themes to help get us kind of closely aligned to being able to take that data and see hot spots of where communities are really feeling passionate about certain themes. But at the end of the day, it's just a chance for me to call up a friend in my local community, reach out to someone who may not often have their voice heard, and just have a very casual conversation with them and just let them know that we're collecting their stories anonymously as data in our work.
Thank you.
And I'm happy to share those resources, by the way, if you'd like.
All right, and it looks like we have another hand raised as well. Let's see. Mr. Copier.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for the presentation. just a question, and maybe I missed it, or maybe I was distracted. It sounds like what you're currently doing is working on the experience side. Are outcomes a part of this? I don't know that I saw, what do you expect to gain at the end of the day as these students transition from high school into whatever, college, trade school, or the job market?
Right. No, that's a great question. So currently, yes, we've supported districts in designing primarily a student experience prototype. But what will happen in the next phases of this work is our partners with the Center for Assessment as well as the Center for Innovation and Education are helping us design a module, a series of activities that will help districts and their local teams co-create an accountability model within that student experience. So that piece, while not yet developed until they refine those student experiences and have a little bit more input from their stakeholders, that piece will be significant when our KCAE starts to look at policy implications. I know Matthew Courtney, I see him on with us today, who's been a crucial partner in thinking through this with us as well. But we do have partners that are helping us do policy scans. We're looking at what districts can and can't do in their prototypes based on current policy, and then that will help us shape a clear path forward on making sure that we can assist in that balance that districts are saying where this conflict exists in the work that they're doing and want to do, and what our current system allows and honors.
All right, does anybody else have a question or comment?
And I will just give a little plug on Tuesday from, I believe, 4:30 to 4:30 to 6, I believe, is our next KCAE meeting. They meet a little less often, about quarterly, but that's available on the KDE media portal. Our Cohort 1 members will be giving updates on their prototypes, and our Cohort 2 members will be talking about the progress of forming their local teams.
All right, thank you so much, Sarah. I sure appreciate your being here and sharing this information with us.
Thank you so much, Tara.
Thank you. All right, our next item on the agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about the role of the Committee of Practitioners. So we'll kind of go back just a little bit and talk about that since we have new members and since it's been a while since we've had our last meeting. And then I'll provide a brief overview of Title I and how KDE implements that program. So give me just 1 minute to pull up the slides. All right, so again, please make sure your camera, audio, and microphone are all turned on so you can see and hear at all times, and make sure microphones are unmuted. So the role of this committee is to advise the Kentucky Department of Education in carrying out its responsibilities under Title I of the Every Student Succeeds Act. It is a statutory requirement established under this statute. The ultimate responsibility of those who are serving on the committee is to advise KDE in carrying out its responsibilities under Title I. And so that means Title I, all parts of it. So later after this, we're going to hear from Title I Part C, which is our migrant program. The duties include but are not limited to the following: attending meetings, advising on policy decisions regarding the implementation of Title I programs, advising on proposed or final state regulations related to Title I, and reviewing and revising technical assistance documents and publications. Committee of Practitioner members are Kentucky residents who have knowledge of and/or demonstrated experience in implementing the provisions of federal law pertaining to Title I. There are benefits to participating. It allows you to perform a state-level advisory role, providing direct input on state policy and guidance to improve education in Kentucky. And it gives you the opportunity to share your expertise with and learn from others who desire to impact Title I and general education. And we do have a webpage, a KDE webpage, all about the Title I Committee of Practitioners. It includes our membership list. It has some past agendas and some other information on that. And by the way, if you have a chance, please look over the membership list and make sure that I have your information correct. If there's anything that needs to be changed on that, please just send me an email directly and we'll make that update. All right, so here's a brief overview of Title I Parts A and D, and then we have more time in our agenda where we're going to devote that to Title I Part C, the migrant program, as I mentioned. So many of you may have seen this. We're going to start with Title I Part A. Many of you may have seen this photograph. This is a photograph of President Johnson sitting with his first grade teacher after signing the Elementary and Secondary Education Act in 1965. And so that, it's been reauthorized several times over the years. The most recent reauthorization was as the Every Student Succeeds Act in 2015. And here are, just for Title I Part A, here are just some of the topics and the sections in that law. It's very lengthy. There's a lot of requirements in Title I Part A, but here are just some of the sections, some of the main sections that we often refer to when we're working with our schools and districts. And I won't go through that list because it's just an example. But here are some statistics in Kentucky. Title I Part A provides a lot of extra funding to our schools and districts. Every one of our districts in Kentucky receives Title I funds. Of course, they don't have to serve all their schools with Title I funds, but we did have 920 schools in Kentucky receiving Title I Part A funds in 2020 to 21. There's a couple of different possibilities for the types of programs they can have, but this is overall, if they receive Title I funds, they were counted as 920. And you can see the amount of funding that's distributed to our school districts. It's a very large amount. Over $249 million was distributed in 2020 to 2021. There are a lot of uses that districts and schools can use their funds for. There's some flexibility in how schools use those, but they have to be used to support the needs of students in the schools. It's very important. It's got to be documented needs. So here are just a few examples, and there are many, many, many uses of funds. It really does go back to needs and whether the use aligns with the intent and purpose of Title I. But we oftentimes will see schools and districts hire some instructional coaches to use it for additional tutoring for students, for counseling, school-based mental health programs and mentoring services, and so on. Oftentimes they may have a need for equipment, materials, and training. Sometimes they use these funds for activities that are shown to be effective at increasing family and community engagement at school. And then oftentimes they'll use some for devices and software for students to access digital learning materials and related training for educators. So again, there are a broad array of allowable uses, and it really depends on the needs of the school or the district and whether it meets the purpose and intent of Title I. So when KDE administers the program, we have many responsibilities. As you saw, that was a large amount of money, and we have to make sure that we meet the requirements of the law. So these are a few of them, although there are many, many others. We have to review and approve district applications for funds. We also have to monitor programs. That is a requirement. So that means we go in and we take a look at what the program or the district or the school is doing, make sure that they are meeting requirements. We monitor both their fiscal activity and the programmatic. So we're looking at program implementation as well, and we look to make sure that they are progressing towards the goals that they have stated in their plan. We provide technical assistance when they have questions, and we also have to make sure that we submit accurate data to the federal government. We must ensure the proper use of grant funds, and that, as I mentioned, that the programs support the intent and purpose of Title I. And we have to make sure that the activities in our approved state plan are carried out. So I'll pause for any questions, and then we'll have more time at the end of this. We just have a few slides on Title I Part D, but does anybody have a question so far on Title I Part A? All right. We'll continue with Title I Part D. This deals with neglected and delinquent students, and it gives a couple of definitions. For neglected, when used with respect to a child, youth, or student, it means an individual who has been committed to an institution other than a foster home or voluntarily placed under applicable state law due to abandonment, neglect, or death of his or her grandparents or parents or guardians. And then the term delinquent, when used with respect to the child, youth, or student, means an individual who resides in a public or private residential facility other than a foster home that is operated for the care of children and youth who have been adjudicated delinquent, court-ordered, or in need of supervision. And then this gives a list of who are at-risk students. So the term at-risk means a school-age individual who's at risk of academic failure, dependency adjudication, or delinquency adjudication, someone who has a drug or alcohol problem, is pregnant or is a parent, has come in contact with the juvenile justice system or child welfare system in the past, is at least 1 year behind the expected grade level for the age of the individual, has limited English proficiency, is a gang member, has dropped out of school in the past, or has a high absenteeism rate at the school. The goals of this program, of this part of Title I, is to improve educational services for children so they can meet the challenging state academic content and achievement standards, to provide neglected and delinquent youth a successful transition from institutionalization to further school or employment, to prevent youth who are at risk from dropping out of school, and provide youth who have dropped out and youth returning from correctional facilities with a support system to ensure their continued education. And here are some examples of Title I Part D programs in our local educational agencies. There's neglected programs could include children's homes and academies. Delinquent programs could include youth development centers, juvenile justice centers, and detention centers and group homes. And at-risk programs could include teen pregnancy programs. So talking about the administration of this part of Title I Part D, the responsibilities of KDE are to oversee and approve program applications, budgets, and expenditures, collect and submit data for funding purposes to the U.S. Department of Education, collect and use data for program improvement, monitor programs for compliance with state and federal statutes and regulations, and provide assistance as needed. So I first want to stop and see if you all have any questions about this information, and then I've got some follow-up questions for discussion about the information if anybody has any comments. All right, let's see if anybody has, if there are any follow-up questions, please make sure to let us know. But I'd like to know if you have any information about this or an experience with this, could you tell us what KDE is doing well in supporting the Title I program in your organization? Anything that we could do to improve or provide further support? And if there's any Title I related topic that you would like to learn more about at the next meeting. And depending on comments, we may have to put that on the agenda for next time. But anyways, does anybody, my screen went blank there just for a second, so I wasn't sure what happened. But does anybody have any comments or questions that they would like to bring forth at this time? Okay. If you think of something, there will be time at the end after the migrant portion of the meeting, and we will. Oh, I see. Ms. Dalton has her hand raised.
I think something that might be beneficial, at least in my district, is you know how there's all the different things that you could spend Title I funds on, but maybe really expanding on that list. Because I think sometimes people don't get creatively out of the box thinking on Title I, and I think there's lots of opportunities there for, especially when you're looking at the mental health and the counseling programs and different things. If there's ways to maybe hear from other places, what they're doing in certain areas with that.
Okay, I think that's a great suggestion, and I will say this. So as a topic of discussion, if we could include that, I think that would be a great idea. We have refrained from putting out a list of approvable things because we don't want people to feel like if it's on the list, it's always okay, because as you know, it's always very situational. What may be okay in one situation may not be okay in another situation. So that's why we don't put out a list like that. However, I do think that you're absolutely right that we've seen before, even in our non-regulatory guidance from the Federal Department of Education, that in the past it has been an idea that it only had to be for reading and math, and that's just not true. There's so many other things that Title I funds could support. So we can have conversation about that here, and we can also have it on another call as well. If anybody has any suggestions or information about how they're using their funds that would like to speak up at this time, please do.
Well, and I'll tell you where some of my thinking on that is, like the impact survey results that have come out. A lot of it is focused on mental health, and just, the overall mental health of the children in our building, the staff, things like that. The percentages were, really high on that. So that's where I was just curious on it.
Thank you. Does anybody else have a question or comment or a response to Ms. Dalton? All right, then we will go ahead and move forward with our next agenda topic, which is, see, I think I'm still sharing my screen. Let me stop. Okay, our next agenda topic is an overview of the migrant program in Kentucky. That's Title I Part C, and we have Christina Benassi, who's the Migrant State Director, and Dwayne Klein, who is a program consultant here in our division.
Thank you, Tara. So good morning. My name is Christina Benassi. I've been with the department 11 years, starting April 1st. I've been the IDNR coordinator and probably state director the last 5 to 6 years. Dwayne, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good morning. I'm Dwayne Klein, and I am the Migrant and Title I program consultant that works with Christina. And I came to KDE in May of 2020 after 33 years of teaching English and leading high schools. And so I've thoroughly enjoyed working with the migrant program. And I hope our presentation today will give you some information about this important group of people.
So what is the Migrant Education Program? So in 1960, we had a documentary that was aired the night before Thanksgiving on that Wednesday. It was called Harvest of Shame by Edward R. Murrow. He was a CBS journalist, and he was able to show the first time that America was exposed to this plight of American farm workers. So they were able to see their oppressive working conditions, poverty, level wages. They were able to see substandard housing, interrupted educational experiences, and the students had lack of belonging. So this was the first time in America that we realized that these children are part of our nation and they're having some disrupted education experiences, and we need to help them. So because of this, we already know about Title I Part A, and Tara talked about that. It was 1965. So after Title I Part A, we realized there were some kids that were falling through the cracks, which were our migrant education students. So in November 3rd, 1966, that's when we came up with the Migrant Education Program. So again, with the Migrant Education Program, it greatly helps. I'm visual, so I always think about our big umbrella. So Title I Part A is your big umbrella, and we're just one of those programs underneath, just like Title I Part D. So we're underneath that Title I Part A. So April, oh, you're good.
Sorry.
So you're fine. So Congress ended up passing the law for the Migrant Education Program, and we started with $9 million, which across the whole United States is not a lot, but at least they're seeing a need that we have a problem and we want to try to help those children. As it's developed, and you can go on, Dwayne, as it's developed, we have the Office of Migrant Education, and they have a mission. So I'm going to kind of read it slowly and talk to you a little bit about it. So the mission of the Office of Migrant Education is to provide excellent leadership, technical assistance, and financial support. So in DC, they help us with leadership. They give us PowerPoints, presentations. They give us the opportunity to collaborate. They have funds called 1308 where we can collaborate with other states and consortiums. Technical assistance is always a big thing, always offering assistance. And of course, they have to give us financial support so we're able to implement this across the nation and within our state. That financial support is to improve the educational opportunities and academic success of our migrant children, youth, agricultural workers, and fishers and their families. So with all of those funds, we want to be able to improve education for these students and help them with their academic success. So the main point of this is to help with academic success, but as we all know, we need to help with the whole child and look at support services and stuff as well, which we do look at. So who is this migratory child that we're talking about? Typically, our migrant children are going to be between, birth through 21. Once they turn 21 years old, they're no longer eligible for the program. These are students that are entitled to a free public education. So again, they could be birthed to, 3 or 4 before they actually enter into school age. And they have to make a qualifying move with or to join a migratory agricultural worker within the last 36 months. So what that means is they have to move across school district lines, across economic necessity. Sorry, I was getting the wrong word. So economic necessity, and they have to change residence. So when they cross these school district lines, that's when they get ready to qualify, as long as they are engaging in qualifying work.
Yeah, and just a quick side point here. Of course, we see a good bit of that here in Kentucky, in districts that are, you have a county district, but then you might have an independent city district, and a good bit of the movement we see occurs between those types of districts, where people will be in a particular location, but for example, they might be in Bowling Green and then move to Warren County, and so those kinds of things are things that we look for.
So this is the federal definition of priority for service. So within the Migrant Education Program, we have certain students that we put priority or that we're supposed to serve first. So with the ESSA, they had changed the qualifications to qualifying move within the previous 1-year period. So we're still looking at students that are risk of failing the state academic or district assessments. Recently added dropout. So you can see we're focusing on our dropout students. Previous years, we've probably had maybe one student that has been documented as just a dropped out that has moved within the last year that we've been able to document. Most of them are, again, ones that move within the year that are at risk of failing. And these are the students that we must serve or we must document that we're serving them first. Again, we are a supplemental program. So if we could put them into other programs that Title I Part A has, IDEA, Title III, we put put these students in those programs first. And then if they still need assistance, we supplement and we provide additional assistance as well. So in Kentucky, these are some of our current numbers. So as you can see, we've been gathering the data since 1718 and we're still gathering, but you can see there is a slight decrease. Nationally, there is a slight decrease with our child category 1 counts, which are the blue ones, which is your eligible school year counts. So those are slightly decreasing across the nation. The other ones, the grayish one is your summer count. So in the summer, we do provide services for them, and you can kind of see how the summer count is kind of waxed and waned just because of COVID. And then the other ones here is your PFS count. PFS has kind of gone back and forth because, again, we're looking at students that are academically distressed or in need, and we didn't have the K-PREP test just recently. So that's why some of those have decreased, because they didn't have that documentation on those. It's not that we have less students, it's just the documentation, I'm sure. Here's just a little bit about our population, ethnic backgrounds. Most of them are Hispanic, which is what we assume, but here lately in Kentucky, we have gotten a lot of refugees. We've gotten a lot of pretty much any of them. You can see, like, we have American Indians, we have Asians, African Americans. So we have a variety of them, although most of them are Hispanic. Most are bilingual, although we do have some in different counties that speak languages that we are not familiar with, and we have to learn those. Cheryl, that's on here in Webster County, has some different languages and different dialects and stuff that's different than Spanish. So some of them are just slightly different, and we have to try to have translators or different ways to be able to communicate with them. When we were talking about the migratory children and crossing school district lines, they have to have qualifying work. So this is just an example. This is our Kentucky crop timeline. These are the main crops that we have in Kentucky. There are a few other ones. The main one that we have, of course, is tobacco. We're a big tobacco state, so a lot of them, tobacco is very labor intensive, which means they have to hire lots of workers in order to help with the tobacco crop. When they're planting, when they're stripping, when they're cutting, all of those things is very labor intensive. We also have some temporary work, including milking cows. That's mainly in the central part of our state, Bowling Green area, but it is across the state as well. And we have some mending fences. Unfortunately, horses do not qualify for the migrant program in Kentucky because they're recreational. So we're looking for crops and things that are more going to help with agricultural purposes that are not recreational sports. So the Migrant Education program is very unique, unlike Title I Part A, where you guys in the districts would receive money straight from the KDE. This one actually is a state-run program, which means the state can decide how they want to spend their money and how they want to divide their state up and what they want to do. In Kentucky, you can see we have 4 regional centers. So we have 4 regional centers that help us with the disbursement of the funds. And then we have what's called consortium and standalone districts, which are the colored ones there. We have 32 standalone consortium districts. A consortium is 2 or more districts that work together. They pool their resources so they can provide services jointly within that community. Each of the region has a coordinator, a recruiter, an advocate, and a clerk. And the region is responsible for all those other districts. We call them non-standalone districts. And they recruit in all those areas to look for migrant students and families, and then they serve them as well.
It should be noted, I'm sorry, Christina. It should be noted that one of the requirements of Title I Part C is the location and recruiting of migrant families and students. Just like in IDEA, districts are required to find disabled students. The same type of requirement is in place for the migrant program. We have to actively search out migrant families.
And I was going to say, we have a great support with the schools. A lot of them will have what's called agricultural surveys, which are part of the enrollment packets with the schools. Just ask them a few basic questions, and that'll go to the regional centers or to the district programs so they can kind of figure out if there's new people in the district. They run infinite campus reports, and then they go out and investigate and see if there's people in there. And of course, word of mouth. It's a very good program, so word of mouth, people will talk about it, so they're able to find more people that way as well. So again, these are just a few examples of some of the services that could be offered to a migrant student. The services vary by district based upon their policy procedures. So not all districts, for example, are going to order or offer transportation. So again, this is a very unique program because in Kentucky, we try to serve students, or we serve students all year. Summer is always a huge time where we have the most impact because before COVID and before all this ESSER money, we were the ones that were having the summer programs. There were 21st Century and a few others, but we basically have one of the biggest impacts on our students. In the summer, we do have regional service centers that help with summer camps. They do an excellent job. They'll have the opportunity for students to attend classes, stay in dorms, learn about college career experiences, improve computer skills. Also in the summer for our elementary students, they may end up having an opportunity to do one-on-one tutoring. The migrant staff will go out to their houses and offer tutoring, or they'll bring them into the schools and they'll have like a summer camp there as well. Excuse me. They also try to utilize summer feeding programs, so they're able to feed the students during the summer and help them out. So again, this is just a small portion of what the migrant staff does, but it just gives you an idea of the type of supplemental supports that we do offer.
And do keep in mind, just as Christina said earlier, that all of these are above and beyond what you would see your district doing for all students. Okay, so when we say transportation, that's beyond the school bus, right? That's beyond specifically getting to and from school, which you do for all students. So though we are truly a supplement to what's already going on in your district.
Kind of leeway to what Dwayne was just saying is we always have this cupcake drawing, and you can kind of see down at the bottom, that's the regular school year. All the regular school programs, your Title I Part A, should benefit all students, regardless of anything migrant or Title III. All students should benefit all of the programs. Then you have Title III or your EL up at the top, and then migrant is the cherry on top. So after our migrant students have received all these other services and they still need assistance, that's when we step in, and that's when we're going to offer additional support. So we may provide additional tutoring or additional support talking to them. You know, we have, I know they mentioned mental health earlier. We do help provide mental health services. We are not certified in that, but we will refer them to mental health services or to mental health people that can help them as well. But we're usually that advocate that has that relationship with the children, so they may confide in our advocates and recruiters. So we're able to help them with that and give them or put them in the right places. So that's always a good thing that we do as well. So any questions on the basic overview of the Migrant Education Program?
And let me encourage you to ask questions, guys. I was a high school principal for 18 years. I didn't know anything about the Migrant Education Program before coming to KDE. And so, this, I kind of have referred to this, as I've spoken with folks around the state, as a really well-kept secret. We serve a high need population. It's important that we get this word out to you all and to other districts, because virtually I live in Owen County, and I live less than a mile from an H-2A tobacco worker's house. The workers come up from Mexico every year, and so if they had school-age students, they would be eligible. Or if they were 18 or 19, they would be eligible for our services. So we have migrant farm workers all over the state that we work to serve.
So in this next part, I'm going to let Dwayne kind of lead here in just a minute, but we're getting your feedback on our SDP. Our SDP is our service delivery plan. It's kind of what we think as our curriculum for our migrant education program, and how we're going to provide services and what the expectations are at the state level, so everybody knows exactly what services we're going to offer and how long we're going to offer them, et cetera. So with that, this is our continuous improvement model. So I'll let you go on and start explaining what's going on.
Sure. You can see, all of us that work in the school environment are familiar with continuous improvement models. And here you can see the migrant programs improvement model includes having state performance targets. And of course, we all are aware of those targets academically. Every 3 years, the migrant program conducts a comprehensive needs assessment. And that's where we take a look at the current state of migrant families and their students and determine how we can start to best meet those needs. Once we do that needs assessment, we design measurable program outcomes, what we expect to achieve over the next 3 years. And those are included in the service delivery plan. So this document that we're discussing right now really guides everything that we do for the next 3 years and sets goals for the program, outcomes that we expect to see. We then devise service delivery strategies that we share with our regional staff and district migrant staff throughout the state, things that we expect them to do to go out and help students achieve. And then, of course, every year we then have a program evaluation, and we have a statewide evaluation that's done externally, but we also have district level and regional level program evaluations that we conduct each year. The federal government at the Office of Migrant Education has conveyed to us 7 areas of concern that they broadly want us to look at as we can consider our service delivery plan. Of course, right at the top, there's educational continuity, and that's going to come into play in our discussion a little bit later. These are students who rarely, for the most part, last even a full school year in a particular location. And that has a huge impact, obviously, on their performance. And so that's one thing that we are trying to address as we develop our services. Instructional time, what's the amount of time that they are actually in school and receiving instruction? Every time families move, we want to very quickly get them into the next school district so they can continue their instruction. We don't want there to be lag time, for example. School engagement. If students are in a school and they know they're only going to be there for 3 months, they're less likely to engage with activities in the school. And we want to promote that. We want to get them connected to the communities where they are. English language development. Of course, we work closely with Title III, which is English language learning services, and we focus not only on student language development, but we also work with families for family literacy, for family language development, because many of the families that we work with have parents who may not be literate in any language. Spanish or English or any other language. So those are challenges that we work with. Access to health services is huge, especially in our out-of-school student population. If you're 18 or 19, you move to a new country, you're working out in a tobacco field, and you have a toothache, you may not know how to access dental services. And so that's where the migrant program can come in and kind of be that bridge between the student's need and the availability of services in the community. And again, that covers the access to services as well. Our service delivery plan has focus areas that we want to emphasize through our services. That includes, and this is new to this service delivery plan this year, mental health. We have seen a huge rise, and I think Ms. Dalton mentioned earlier, just this escalation of need in mental health services, and so that's going to be something that we want to focus on. Academic performance, of course, in every SDP, that's a priority. Parent involvement, trying to engage families in our work. We want to continue to serve out-of-school youth, those that have either left because of dropping out, although we don't have very many of those, or those who are beyond the, say, what would be their senior year, but continue to come to Kentucky to work in agriculture. We want to improve graduation rates. Right now, I think our migrant graduation rate is somewhere around, is it around 80%, Christina?
It's pretty high for the most part. Most of our students do graduate. Yeah.
And then, of course, school readiness at the other end of the student population, your 0 to 5 students. We work very early in trying to prepare them for kindergarten readiness. Okay, so I was warned that you may be a little reluctant to jump in here, but we're very hungry for your feedback. We're right in the middle of developing this service delivery plan, and we certainly covet your wisdom here. We've got a few questions that we'd like to touch on, and we want to hear your responses. This first set of questions particularly focuses on mental health and mental health services. And so let's begin just by briefly talking about what kinds of mental health resources do you have available for your families and students in your school districts, in your local areas? What are the kinds of things that you are putting into the pot, as it were, in trying to develop mental health service plans? And I know you've got them. Yes.
Dwayne, I'll start. My
Sure.
wife works for 7 county services, and they serve a large number of lower income families with mental health services, on a wide spectrum, from crisis students to kids who just need some day-to-day counseling.
David, how do they get attached to that service? Does the school make referrals or?
So just, I don't know real deep. I know sometimes she'll get referrals from school districts. Sometimes she'll get referrals from hospitals or other physicians, but other than that, that's about the depth of my knowledge.
I got it. Thank you. Ashley?
Yeah, I was just going to say that in my role here at KDE, one of my responsibilities is to approve staffing allocations to the district. And a number of districts for this next school year, the 22-23 school year, are adding like mental health therapists, mental health professionals into their staffing as part of their, just helping with this initiative, but they are adding that position in their districts, which is very helpful.
Yeah, excellent. Matthew, or was it Matthew or Ms. Dalton? Ms. Dalton, go ahead.
Okay. In Davis County, we just expanded our mental health team this current year. So we have 11 licensed professionals that serve our 18 schools. Most of those are licensed clinical social workers. And so they're assigned certain school buildings. So we have one person that serves, an entire high school. But they provide the mental health services there on site.
Excellent. I know before I left Owen County, we had begun to give a twice annual universal mental health screener to all of our students. It could be opted out of by parents, but we gave that screener twice a year, and we regularly found upwards of 20% of our students at the highest risk level for mental health need. And so this is a real need that we're in the migrant program really trying to keep an eye on, because migrant families are going to be less likely to have taken or to be able to have time and let alone money to focus on mental health issues that they may or may not be aware of.
Now, I will tell you something new that through a grant with our local hospital that we have kind of piloted this year. We had some of our students that were in the migrant program that, let's say they go to a school counselor and it's because they're suicidal. They're having suicidal thoughts. And so we've worked with our migrant program to help be that an interpreter that's in person, so that you're not making a phone call through an interpreter line to let parents know, because that's so impersonal and sometimes it can be hit and miss, on how it goes. And that's been a little more that's been pretty effective.
Excellent. Yeah, and I certainly agree. And this is one of the things that I think we do. It's one of the best things that we do is we are that personal, in-person, face-to-face agent, if you will, that can go out and really connect. Cheryl down in Webster County, Michael in the southern region, do this every day. And make those connections, and that really enables us to do all the other kinds of services, right? If we can have that fundamental relationship built, everything else gets a little easier. So let's move on here. Talk a little bit about the issues you face in terms of students and families and their ability to pay for these services. For example, are the we heard from Christina in Davis County, you've got and from Ashley, you've got professionals going into the schools to provide services. Do other districts have other models where they refer to external services, and how do you pay for those? How do parents pay for those? So nobody else has other models? Because I know I'd be interested to know a statewide type of thing, a data point related to Ashley's comment. I wonder how many districts are bringing in mental health staff like Davis County. I wonder if this is broadly done, or maybe only in larger urban areas around Owensboro, around Bowling Green, around Lexington, that sort of thing.
We're located in Eastern Kentucky, and we do the same type of model where we bring in outside contract people to work with our students, but it's done completed by a referral process. But that's a good question. I have had parents in the past say, well, my insurance won't pay for them. And then we always do referrals and try to work with those students with our guidance counselors or student advocates.
Right. Thank you, Kelly. Anybody else have a comment on kind of the types of models you are seeing? Sorry about that. Generally, do you find that there are enough, I think I know the answer, do you find that there are enough mental health services to go around to meet the need? Yeah, and I'm seeing a couple of heads shake here. That was an easy question to get you involved in the conversation, right? I think that's one of the things that's driving the migrant program's desire to get in that mix. Is we know that there not only are there probably not enough, but this last question, I think a lot of parents aren't necessarily aware of resources that are available. Have you seen in your districts or in your schools, have you seen particularly effective ways of communicating with parents around mental health or mental health resources?
Cheryl, you have your hand raised. I don't know if you saw it.
Something we've done the last 3 years is in our summer programming where we go to the homes to do summer school. One day a week, we've embedded a mental health professional with our teacher teams. So 20% of the time, all of our families will be exposed to a mental health professional.
Did we lose Dwayne? Pick it up. Thank you, Cheryl. I don't know what happened to Dwayne, but we'll pick up. Is there any other ways that you all are sharing the resources? Are you all handing out pamphlets at school to share the resources, or is there other ways that you're doing this? Is it more of a case-by-case basis depending on if the child comes to you? All right, Ms. Dalton?
We've talked about working with our migrant program. We haven't done it yet, but to offer maybe just informational, meetings on mental health. So if we see a lot of kids who are experiencing anxiety, to be able to talk to those parents about this is what this looks like. And here's local places that you could go. One of our biggest hurdles is sometimes there needs to be therapy that you need a counselor that speaks Spanish. And we don't have anybody here, so they have to go almost to another county to be able to receive those kind of resources. So that kind of hurts us a little bit too. But I think a lot of it, if we could start at just an informational piece, because I think there's a stigma attached with those type of services, period.
No, you're exactly right. And a lot of the Hispanic families, it's something they don't talk about. A lot of us that are Caucasian send hey, I have these issues. Look at me. We send a more open up and talk about more of the things. But a lot of them keep it very personal and they think something's wrong or they won't want to talk about it. So getting them to open it up because it's a cultural thing is very different too. Dwayne, are you back on?
I am sorry.
Okay.
Somebody
No,
called my
you're good.
office phone and it knocked me off of Teams. So I apologize, but I am back.
No worries. If you're ready, do you want to go on to the next part? Because we only have about 10 more minutes.
Yep. Our next set of questions has to do with delivering services to our priority for service students. And if you'll recall, Christina talked a little bit about that. Again, these are students who not only are academically at risk, but have to have moved. They have to have made their qualifying move for the migrant program in the last 12 months. Okay. And so that really narrows. We're not saying that there aren't students who have been with us for 2 years that need academic help. We know there are, and we certainly work to meet those needs. But this is a specific subgroup that we are obligated by federal law to provide service to. So given the number of intervention resources available to your district, how can Migrant Education provide additional help to students without overwhelming them or their families? One of the things that we run into, and you may see this as well, even within the scope of the services you provide, the interventions you provide locally. A lot of times kids will be getting so many interventions, they get overwhelmed, they get intervention overload. And so let's talk a little bit about that. And if you have any particular or any effective ways of avoiding that, how do you work with kids to try to find that just right level of intervention?
And I'd like to jump in and add, is there anything that KDE could do that you know of that could help with that?
Good, thank you. This kind of ties back to the mental health discussion. One of the things that we see consistently when we talk to kids, when we view student feedback, right, is the stress they feel at school. And a lot of that, you know, even under the best of circumstances, students come away feeling burdened, overwhelmed by the work, that kind of thing. And then on top of that, if you're a student who has academic need, and you've got 3 or 4 different kinds of professional educators coming at you to try to help you, that help can be overwhelming. So how have you thought about that locally, and how do you deal with that?
If I may, this may be a discussion too that we can reach out to our standalone, excuse me, standalone and other districts. I was just looking at the list of folks that are a part of this committee. Of course, there's a few of us that work with migrant, but for the majority, we do have a few that have migrant programs. The majority of the folks here today don't have a migrant program in their district, except for Davis County. There's a few others that are represented that aren't in attendance today, but that may be something that we could send out to the committee as well, and especially to target those people who do have programs in their districts, and see if there's any other resources that they can help provide to us as well.
Good. Thank you, Michael. And let me offer, you know, if you've thought about this, not necessarily in the context of the migrant program, I'd be interested to hear some of your thinking around that. Cheryl, I see your hand raised.
One of the things that we've been doing for several years is we have a data retreat day where we bring in classroom teachers, other teachers that provides extra services, administrators, and we write a plan on the students, and that includes all of the services they're receiving, and that allows us to know that they're being overserved in a certain way, or that maybe they need help outside of the school day, or it just gives us a focus on what they're already receiving, and tells us that no, you don't need to pull them during the school day.
Right. Excellent. You know, and I think that's an excellent insight, is, you know, getting the professionals who deliver these services to talk to one another, right? And to come together and be able to, you know, prioritize, if you will, or at least list all of the different interventions that given students are receiving. Okay, the last one that I know everybody's got an opinion on. Here we go. Formative assessment. We, as part of our program evaluation, we have used in the past the annual K-Prep performance of our students as an academic indicator for particularly in reading and math. And we are very interested in trying to make our assessment program, if you will, within the migrant education program. We want to make it useful to our staff and to our families in terms of helping them see growth as it's happening. Okay, and taking a test at the end of the school year is now the Kentucky summative assessment, right? Taking one test at the end of the year, particularly if you think about it, particularly for migrant students who may not be here either to take the test or are not here long enough during the school year to be eligible to take the test, you know, that's not really an effective measure for us to use for our families. And so with that in mind, what suggestions do you have regarding best practices or solutions for formative assessments that we could use within the migrant program? This would not be an additional assessment necessarily for your district, but something that we might be able to use specifically within the migrant program with our students. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Dwayne, we talked a little bit about this the other day. There's just a myriad of assessments used across the state formatively. So I think really what you're trying to get at is how do we narrow that down to something that would be effective for use within the migrant program.
Right. Right.
That again is, that's not overwhelming again.
Exactly. And what we found, we have tried to collect, for example, district formative assessment data, right? But what we find, exactly what David just said, everybody uses kind of their own thing, and let's say there might be somewhere between 8 and a dozen primary tools that folks use, but that means that somewhere in all this, we need to have the capacity to boil down 8 to 12 different data sets into a common language, and we're, to be perfectly honest, we have difficulty with that. And so we're kind of exploring in this question, and even in the next question here, are there some specific strategies? Are there some specific tools that you would commend that we might look at as a migrant program to be able to use with our kids? We might use it, for example, if we enroll a student, if we see a student enroll, we might give them an assessment as a pretest. And then if we find out they're going to be leaving 5 months later to go pick apples in Washington, before they leave, a migrant staff member could give them a post screening. So we would have that tangible growth number, if you will, or amount that we could then share with the family. We can use it in our program evaluation, that sort of thing.
I don't know if this is what you're talking about. I know, with our elementary kids, we used MAP testing.
Yep.
And it's something that you're doing at least 3 times a year, so that you're doing it in the beginning, you're doing it in December. You would be able to show families, we've made progress here. These are things we need to work on. It wouldn't just be a one time a year, but it would give you an opportunity to show where you need improvement, maybe.
Good. Yeah, and we do find a lot of local districts use MAP, certainly K-8. And so that is one of the tools that we could look at for sure.
All right, and I'm going to jump in here because it looks like we are almost out of time. We just got a couple minutes. So what I would suggest is, first of all, if you have in the next couple of minutes any additional future topics that you would like to recommend. So earlier in the meeting, Ms. Dalton asked if we might be able to expand on the list for the Title I allowable expenditures and perhaps hear from other schools or districts on how they're using their funds. And we can certainly add that as an agenda topic. Does anybody else have anything they would like to recommend for a future agenda topic? All right,
Tara,
and then my last, yes, sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, Tara, maybe a committee review of the migrant SDP. I know that's going to get reviewed by migrant folks specifically, but that might be something we need to review through the committee.
Okay, we could certainly do that as well. Thank you for that suggestion. Does anybody else have a suggestion? Okay, if you think of something else that you would like, and also if you have any additional feedback on Dwayne's last 2 questions on those slides, please send that to me directly at my email, okay? Because we don't want an email to go out to the whole committee. Just send that to me directly at my email, and I'll work with you directly through that. So any additional feedback or suggestions for future meetings, please email those to me directly. I want to thank you all again so much for meeting with us today. It's so nice to hear and see you all again. Really appreciate your time and look forward to continuing to meet with you through this committee. Thank you so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tara.
Thank you.